Today we start trigonometry, and we're going to be dealing with trigonometry for a long time. And one of the things that you need to know first off about trigonometry is that for the most part, trigonometry deals with right triangles. A lot of the time. I'm not going to say all of the time. A lot of the time, we're dealing with right triangles. When you learned last year the basics about sine, cosine, and tangent, and you learned that little rule SOHCAHTOA last year for those were as they applied to right triangles. Okay? So that's just a little brief statement about when you see the word trigonometry. For the most part, we're usually, notice I said usually, a lot of times talking about some kind of right triangle, and they're going to be incorporated a lot of the time. But today, we're going to start with this idea of radian and degree measure. And as we start this, we want to look at the coordinate plane. All right? And if we talk about an angle, if I have one side of an angle right here, and then I swing that angle around to here, and so that's the other side of the angle, all right, then this is called the initial side, or if you think initial, you think beginning side. And the side that we finish at is what we call the terminal side. When you think of terminal, you think of the end of something. When you finish a plane ride, you know, if you get on an airplane and take a flight, you finish at the terminal, all right? And so the terminal is kind of the ending side, all right? Now, one thing about this, if I swing this way, it's a positive angle. If I swing the other way from here, it's a negative angle. All right? And so that leads us into the first thing we want to learn about here, and that is coterminal angles. Coterminal angles have the same initial and terminal sides. All right, they have the same initial and terminal sides, and they do not have to swing in opposite directions. Okay, coterminal angles have the same initial and terminal sides, and they do not have to swing in opposite directions. Let's look at a couple examples of coterminal angles. First, let's say that I started. Well, we're always going to start right here, by the way. When we're talking about coterminal angles, we're always going to start right there with our angle on the positive x-axis. And let's say that I swung an angle around to here, and that angle was 140 degrees. All right? Now remember what I said. Coterminal angles have the same initial side and the same terminal side. So if this is my first angle, if I want a pair of coterminal angles, then one way I could get the other angle is to start here and swing the other way to that point. Now, how many degrees are in a circle? 360. So if I were to subtract 140 from 360, wouldn't I get 220? Right? So this angle would be negative 220 degrees. Because remember, we swung in the opposite direction. That would be an example of two coterminal angles that have the same initial side and the same terminal side. All right? That's one way that we could have that. Let's look at another example. So let's, again, we're going to start right here. And just for fun, I'm going to swing around to the same degree measure, 140 degrees. Now remember I said you don't have to swing in the opposite direction, but I can swing around more than once. So if I swing around more than once, I'll get a new color here. Okay, if this is my first angle, excuse me, then if I started here with the second angle and swung all the way around, which is of course 360 degrees, and then swung around to that point right there so that I still had the same terminal side, that would also be a pair of coterminal angles. Now, what would the degree measure of the second angle be? Well, I went around 360 degrees, right? And then I went 140 degrees more, right? So that second angle had a measure of 500 degrees. Okay? So in other words, didn't I just add 360 to the original one? Right? So that's another way that you can get a coterminal angle, is I can just add 360 to the original one. There's a coterminal angle. And what about our first example, negative 220? Isn't that just 140 minus 360? Right? So, in other words, I can find a coterminal angle by just adding 360 to the angle or subtracting 360 from the angle. Okay? Now, and guess what? There's still another possibility in this case. You know how we went around to 500 degrees? Right? Guess what? I could go around a whole nother time. Right? So I could keep adding 360. Right? And I could say that an angle of 860 degrees is coterminal. And guess what? Back to this one, I could subtract 360 again. And negative 580 degrees is also a coterminal angle. So there's an endless number of possibilities. Negative 580 is coterminal. Negative 220 is coterminal. And on this side, 500 is coterminal and 860 degrees are coterminal. All right? So, two ways, let's just kind of summarize this. Two ways to get coterminal angles. Number one, subtract 360 degrees or 2 pi. I will talk about that some more in a minute. Subtract 360 degrees or 2 pi from the original angle. Okay, we'll talk about the 2 pi some more in a few minutes, or maybe in our next day of notes, but just for now, we know that we can subtract 360 and get a coterminal angle. I can also add 360 degrees, or 2 pi, to the original angle. That's another way. Okay, and you might want to make a note. This can be done as many times as necessary. Like I said, we can just keep adding 360 and get as many coterminal angles as I want, or I can keep subtracting 360. All right, so one of the things, of course, that they're going to ask you to do tonight is they're going to say, find 2 coterminal angles for the given angle. And I think sometimes they say find one that's positive and one that's negative. All right? So just want to keep that in mind, that we have a couple options. Let's say they give me 116 degrees. And they say find 2 coterminal angles for 116 degrees. Well, remember what I said. We can do 116 plus 360 to get one of them. And I can do 116 minus 360 to get another one. All right? So 116 plus 360, isn't that 476 degrees? Right? And I can do 116 minus 360, which is going to be a negative angle, and that's negative 244 degrees. So I've come up with one that's positive and one that's negative. How could I find 2 more coterminal angles if I wanted to? Couldn't I just keep adding and subtracting 360, right? If I wanted to find more, I could add 360 to this one. If I wanted to find another one, I could subtract 360 from this one. All right? Let's do another one. What if they give you negative 450 degrees? And let's just say, just for fun, that they say find one that's positive and one that's negative. Find 2 coterminal angles, one that's positive, one that's negative. I'm going to pause the video and let you try it. All right, this should have been fairly straightforward. If I add 360 to this, don't I get negative 90? So there's a negative angle that's coterminal with this one. If I want a positive one, don't I have to add 360 to that? Okay, if I want another answer that's positive, then I have to take negative 90 and add 360 to that. All right, and that would give me positive 270. Okay. Now, real quick, what if they say to sketch an angle, in standard position, we'll call this another example, because I think you're going to run into this in homework. What if they give you 100 degrees? And they say to sketch that angle in standard position. Well, you know, I'm not going to make you get out a protractor and do this to perfection. But I am going to expect you to remember that we always start in standard position right here. all right? And then we swing in either the positive or negative direction from there. So if I have a 100-degree angle, that's a little more than 90 degrees. So I'm going to swing a little past 90, and my final side will be right there. And so that would be a 100-degree angle sketched in standard position. All right? What if, we'll just use this same graph, what if I had negative 200 degrees? And I wanted to sketch that one in standard position. Well, I would start again where I always do, right here. And since it's negative, I'm going to swing this way, swing past 90, swing past 180, and just a little bit past it, about 20 degrees past it, and that angle is going to finish about right there, and that would be a negative 200-degree angle, sketched in standard position. That's one of the things, other things that you're going to have to do tonight. Now, one other thing we didn't talk about is what if they ask you to do this, and then they say, which quadrant is the angle in? And I don't know how much time you spent on quadrants last year, but it's real simple. This quadrant right here, when we talk about a quadrant, we're talking about one of the corners of the coordinate system. This is quadrant 1. Okay, that's the first quadrant. This is quadrant 2. This is quadrant 3. And this is quadrant 4. So we start here and we work around this way. Okay? So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if they ask you which quadrant the angle is in, you look for where the terminal side is. Okay? This 100-degree angle, we would say, was in quadrant 2. I'm just going to put Q2. And this, but this negative 200-degree angle, it finished also in quadrant 2. So you just look for where the terminal side finishes if they're asking you which quadrant, all right, the angle lies. And we are going to stop there for today.